Foodways and Health, a presentation for Anthropology 680. In order to understand the relation between foodways and health, it would behoove us to examine foodways a bit to understand what they are and why they are important. What are foodways? Merriam-Webster defines foodways as, quote, the eating habits and culinary practices of a people, region, or historical period, end quote. This encompasses the ingredients, methods, and tools used in the harvesting, preparation, and consumption of food items. Regional differences and cultural influence are large influences on foodways, and cultural groups just a few miles apart can have completely different foodways. These differences could be due to environment, religion, history, or any number of elements that shape human culture. In this example, we see a style of planting known as three sisters. The sisters are corn, beans, and squash. These plants are grown and harvested in a symbiotic environment and maximize what for many Native American tribes was very limited open agricultural space. Each plant provided and received benefits from this style of planting, and this planting and harvesting style influenced the food culture in Native populations such as the Iroquois. This picture shown here is an example of a meat pie, which was a common food item across many time periods. They were easily transported and provided a complete meal in a compact package. Eventually, these pies became more elaborate in the richer households during medieval times and onward. This form of preparation allowed for faster cultural expansion in the case of the Roman army, and allowed workmen to remain on site and still consume a full midday meal, a vital benefit to shepherds and other animal tenders. A medieval Christmas feast, shown here, was a chance to show off your wealth and stability through food. Large amounts of intricately cooked and displayed food items were a means of showing that you had more than the basic necessities and could indulge in finer, more exotic foods. This is an example of drastically different foodways existing within the same culture, since peasants were unlikely to eat anything as sumptuous as the items shown here. Now that we have a better understanding of foodways, we can discuss the idea of health. Good health, bad health, and the concept of healthy are not homogeneous terms, and what may be considered healthy in one culture could be considered unhealthy in another. By applying lenses to our views on health and healthiness, we can attempt to tease out some of the subtler elements in this area. However, we must be careful how and when we apply these lenses. Cultural and historical understanding is paramount to recognition of the views held by a certain person, group, or society. Since views on health vary greatly around the world, it is essential to understand the culture one is interacting with. Viewing a culture from an etic approach requires total immersion in the cultural and historical nuances of the group, but it will provide the most thorough view of health as it is understood by the observed culture. Traditions and group history are important elements of views on health. A region that is famine-prone will most likely view individuals that we may consider overweight to be ideal. This is because in their history and culture, those that could provide enough food to not only maintain body weight but increase it would probably be viewed as healthy and thriving. In America, being overweight is considered unhealthy, and an overweight individual would be encouraged to begin a weight management program of some kind. Environmental elements often affect the health of individuals as much as culture and tradition. A region that can produce large crops of grain but has very little land for livestock will most likely tailor their diet to the available food items. These diets may be centuries old in some areas, such as the Mediterranean or Japan. However, the people and the diet have evolved together and are well suited to the environment and culture, even if they seem unhealthy to the outside viewer. As an outsider, how we view health ourselves can affect how we view the health beliefs of another culture. This is where it becomes incredibly important to be aware of the lenses one applies to observation and perspectives. No two people will have the exact same lens, and that means that awareness of our lenses, and those of others, should be foremost in our mind. Even two people who have lived through the same historical period can have drastically different views based on their experiences. Think of a German soldier and a Russian soldier describing the siege of Leningrad. You would get very different accounts, and the historical lenses created for both men by this event would be as different as their experiences. Now that we understand foodways and health, and the many ways to view health, we can discuss how these two areas affect one another. Food, no matter where you go, is a key factor in the health of a person. The items being consumed and the means by which they are prepared affect different aspects of health. For example, food preserved in salt will require soaking before preparation and/or consumption. but there is no way to remove all of the salt from the food item. Thus, in a diet that relies heavily on these items, such as seen on ships with sailors, we will see meals high in sodium, which affects blood pressure and can cause kidney ailments. Historically, this would have been untraceable until a person suffered a stroke, heart attack, or renal failure. Another way that foodways affect health is the introduction of foreign food items and foodways into a population. A perfect example of this is sugar. Sugar was not widely available in many cultures until it was introduced by an outside element. Introduction of sugar into the diet with very little oral health measures meant that tooth decay became more prevalent and affected the ability to consume various other food items needed for proper nutrition. In order to have foodways, one needs to have food, and times or regions of crisis normally find themselves visited with famines, followed by plague or disease of some kind. Poor health from a lack of needed nutrients reduces the body's ability to fight off disease, and in earlier times, general lack of hygiene and close living quarters provided a perfect breeding ground for disease. Foodways during famine altered as certain items not normally consumed were considered acceptable, even desirable. This desperation to consume barely edible and sometimes non-edible items resulted in detrimental effects on overall and future health of the individuals. When we evaluate foodways and health in the modern world, we must understand that some cultures still adhere to traditional foodways. Examples of this adherence are Jewish kosher laws and Muslim halal laws that have remained the same for hundreds of years. However, some traditional diets have evolved over time as environmental variables such as climate change or political upheaval push them to change. As these diets change, the cultural concept of health must also change as new norms come into being and old ones are abandoned. An unfortunate side effect of changing foodways is the trend of specialized foodways, diets designed based on little to no actual scientific evidence with the intent to improve health. While some of these foodways may be beneficial to certain people, for example, removing gluten for those with celiac disease, others are either harmful or require proper nutritional understanding to be healthy. As more of these foodways enter and leave the cultural attention, the perspectives of health shift with each introduction and exit. Using weight as an example, we see foodways such as weight loss diets that tout results of losing X number of pounds a week. These diets were popular in the 90s when healthy was viewed as synonymous with skinny. Now we have a large population of people who are focusing on healthy weight as being the natural weight one's body tends towards with a balanced diet. However, there is still a large market for weight loss solutions since there has been very little cultural change in what is portrayed in media as healthy. Changes in perspective have changed as foodways have changed, and foodways have also changed to reflect movements in cultural perspectives on health. Examples of this include the organic movement and farm-to-table ideologies. Even in the modern world, foodways still fail. Crops do not produce like they should, herds die, or transportation methods come to a halt. When these instances are small-scale, they simply produce a short-term bump in prices due to supply and demand principles. However, long-term or large-scale failures can have a detrimental effect on the populations that rely on these food items for survival. Another example of foodways failure is the creation of urban food deserts. In both of these situations, health and nutrition decline drastically. In a famine, items that have less nutritional value are used in combination with more nutritious foods to stretch these foods and make them last longer. There is also a later risk for diabetes in adulthood for children who survive famine conditions. In an urban food desert, limited food choices lead to diseases such as obesity and diabetes and tend to affect minority groups in greater numbers due to the areas that are prone to food desert conditions. The views are what is healthy in food desert conditions and famine areas can fluctuate drastically depending on what foods are available and when and how easily they can be obtained. Now we can see that foodways and health go hand in hand, no matter what culture, region, or time period we are studying. Perspectives on health affect the accepted foodways, and the available foodways affect the normal perspectives on health.